Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm John Feinblatt, president of Everytown for Gun Safety.
And I'm Shannon Watts, founder of Moms Demand Action, the grassroots arm of Everytown.
Today, we're hosting Senator Tammy Duckworth for the 10th installment of Demanding Women, Quarantine Conversations about Gun Violence. Senator Duckworth, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you.
It's really, really good to be on. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Senator, we've been talking with women leaders around the country about urgent issues like racial justice, police violence, and COVID-19, all through the lens of gun violence. And so we're excited to hear from you today, particularly given your military experience. Because as a combat veteran, when you speak about guns, you speak about them with real know-how. And when you speak about the need for gun safety, you speak about it with great power. I was so struck, Senator, with your Washington Post op-ed. You did such a terrific job of explaining why so many veterans are joining the gun safety movement, something we're seeing at Everytown and at Moms Demand Action. And you put it perfectly when you said it's because each of them knows that something's wrong when kids walk into school every morning unsure if they're entering a combat zone. That's the sort of common sense message Americans are just pining for today. As a veteran, as a senator, and as a leader who has seen firsthand how cities struggle with gun violence, we couldn't be more eager to hear more from you today. So Shannon, why don't you take it from here? I'm going to hop on Twitter and I'm going to watch the rest from there.
Thanks, John. And Senator Duckworth, thank you so much for being here. I want to dive right in. First of all, thank you so much for your service and the sacrifices you have made for our country. You come from a long line of veterans. You've said this lineage has helped shape your perspective on our nation's gun violence crisis. What has being in combat taught you about guns and about our nation's gun violence crisis?
Well, it's not just what being in combat has taught me, it's just what my entire family's history and my military training has taught me. We were taught discipline. And my brother and I, from the time we were children, because my dad was a world-class marksman. He was part of what's called the President's 100, which are the top 100 military marksmen in the Army. And I grew up around guns on a range, but my dad was very, very strict about how we handled the weapons. They were kept safe at the range. We would clean them. We were taught, never point that gun at a human being. I mean, all sorts of precautions. And in the military, we were taught discipline and control. And, even the military doesn't provide our troops with fully automatic weapons, for example, as a weapon that they carry on themselves. There's a squad weapon, but the sidearm that pilots carry or the rifles that most troops carry doesn't even have a fully automatic weapon, because they learn in Vietnam that troops waste bullets that way, and they're dangerous. You're more likely to kill your allies than you are the enemy when you have something that's out of control. So what I learned growing up in the military and being growing up as a marksmanship family, but then also in the military, is this real discipline and having the appropriate tools for the appropriate job. And so when it comes to gun violence, I just am appalled at how widespread, the proliferation of firearms have become in our nation. Assault weapons don't belong in the street, on our city streets. I don't want anything on our streets that's going to punch through the walls of my house and kill my children. I have a 5-year-old who's about to start kindergarten. Now she's probably going to end up doing online learning like so many kids this fall because of COVID. But I will tell you, I seriously thought about buying, bulletproof blackboards and backpacks for her and for her classroom. Is that where we are as a nation? Is that where we are as a nation? The parents have to make this decision. And I haven't had the conversation with her yet about what to do if a shooter comes into her classroom, but I'm going to, and that makes me really, really sad. And it's wrong. And so, there are common sense things that we as a nation can do when it comes to sensible gun control that everybody supports, like universal background checks. And so I think I bring a voice from my experience in the military and being in combat. Like, some of the stuff that's being easily sold to people who claim they needed to hunt we didn't even use in Fallujah, for crying out loud.
That's really a powerful statement. Senator, I want to talk quickly about Chicago. And this is a city that Donald Trump mentions often. Like other cities across the country, Black people in Chicago are disproportionately impacted by the daily gun violence, but also the COVID-19 pandemic. And now we see that Donald Trump is sending federal agents into Chicago. So given that deployment of inadequately trained and heavily armed federal agents, which has created a crisis in Portland in recent weeks, what is your reaction to these plans?
Well, I mean, if this kind of abuse can happen in Portland, people are right to be worried that it might happen elsewhere on American soil, and not just in Chicago. I mean, the president is targeting Democratic cities, but this could happen anywhere. I sent a letter to Trump telling him I don't even think about doing this here in Chicago, and I'm pleased that the administration appears to have agreed not to do in Portland what they did in Portland and Chicago. But law enforcement agents are meant to protect and serve our communities. That's not what the Trump administration is doing in Portland. He wants to claim the title of the law and order president. But you know what? If he wants to do that, then he needs to call Mitch McConnell and tell him, pass sensible gun control legislation, pass universal background checks, pass significant penalties, and put more money towards ending straw purchasing of firearms, go after the trafficking of firearms that happens in this country. What happened in Portland isn't law and order. It's a violation of civil rights, and it's a violation of our Constitution. And I was very proud to join Senator Merkley and Wyden in introducing a bill to block the very dangerous actions that the Trump administration is taking right now. We won't let Trump deceive American citizens, and we won't let him deprive them of their constitutional rights.
Well, thank you for being on top of that situation. Staying in Chicago for a second, on Tuesday evening, 15 people were shot in front of a funeral home in Chicago, and we're seeing an increase in gun violence in cities across the country. In preparation for the next COVID relief package, how critical is it that this includes funding for community-based violence intervention programs?
It is absolutely critical. I just had a conversation with Mayor Lightfoot not 2 hours ago on this very issue. And I've also been talking to leadership and writing to them to tell them just that, demanding that they make significant investments in violence intervention programs. One of the things that Mayor Lightfoot said this morning was specifically the lack of intervention programs and also social services. She said that, what we're having now as a result of this pandemic is a lot of the Cook County jails are releasing offenders who were held in jail out on electronic monitoring with an ankle bracelet. And some of these folks are pretty bad folks. And even the ones who are not bad, who are not have a very violent history, they're going back out into the community, but there's no community services for them. Many of them are homeless. They've listed somebody they know's address as their point of contact, but there's no wraparound services. And so what happens, they fall right back into the streets, and they fall right back under the influence of the violent elements within society. Outreach programs decrease the rates of gun violence and homicides by addressing the underlying causes of violence. And all of this has been made worse since COVID-19 began to ravage our communities. And I think that funding for these programs in the next package is vital, because the outreach workers often that are part of these programs often serve the dual purpose of acting as first responders and violence interrupters. They can mitigate violence and the spread of COVID-19 at the same time. But if you're in Chicago right now and you're on the west side or the south side of the city, and you have someone who's having a mental health crisis, someone who's having an opioid overdose, for example, and you call for help on 911, you're going to get a police officer show up with body armor and firearms and tasers. You send a hammer, to the job. Every problem is a nail. We should be sending, mental health workers and substance abuse workers and people who can say, hey, they can take them to an available bed for treatment. Instead, what they get is a police officer who's going to take them to jail. And that doesn't help anyone.
Staying on COVID for a second, Senator, we have seen a rise in hate-fueled violence and intimidation, particularly against Asian American and the Pacific Islander communities. Do you see a connection between the hate the AAPI community is experiencing during this pandemic and the vitriol that Donald Trump and his allies in the media have expressed?
Oh, absolutely. He is using racist rhetoric against Asian Americans to distract the American people from his utter failure to deal with this pandemic from the very beginning. This president and his allies use very racist terminology, blaming Asians and Chinese Americans in particular for this pandemic, when in fact the cases that came to this country really came from Italy. This is a global pandemic, and really to go after Asian Americans is really this president's desperate attempt to distract the American people from his utter failures to do basic things to contain this pandemic. Remember that early on, he was praising the communist Chinese for how well they were handling things. And he said that the pandemic was going to magically go away on its own. And he's done nothing to boost production of PPE for our first responders, for our healthcare workers, for our grocery store clerks. He's done nothing to promote the wearing of masks until recently. And suddenly now he's wearing masks now that he sees his political fortunes are falling. This man is motivated purely by politics and not by the good of the country or the well-being of American people. And I've yet to see him console Americans for the 140,000 dead Americans that we've lost to this pandemic. And so don't fall for it. Don't fall for this racist rhetoric, and don't let people fall for it, because he's just trying to distract all of us.
I think those are really good points, Senator. And look, you have been leading. You are a woman of so many firsts. You are the first Thai American woman elected to Congress, the first woman with a disability elected to Congress, the first senator to give birth while in office. And so for so many, and I think women in particular, like myself, you are an inspiration. So what message do you hope that your story and your accomplishments will send to people across the country?
I hope that the message it sends is that anything is possible in this country, right? The American dream isn't necessarily a house in the suburbs, 2 cars, and 2.5 kids and a dog. I think people think that's the American dream, right? The American dream is is that this is a nation that gives you the opportunity to work as hard as you possibly can for a future that you want, whatever your dream is. That American dream hasn't been there for everyone. There are inequities in our nation. And so if you were born in the wrong zip code, if you're born with the wrong skin color, if you're born into privilege versus into poverty, you may find that the American dream is out of touch. You could work as hard as you possibly can and you can't get ahead. So we have to do something to make sure that we fix the inequities in our society. But I grew up, I was hungry as a kid. I was on food stamps. I didn't speak English until I was 8, even though I'm a natural born American, but I grew up overseas because my father was stationed in Asia as a U.S. government employee. So my first language was from the countries that I lived in. But I was able to make my way because of all the opportunities that have been made available to me. And that's truly the American dream. So I hope that, if anything, my experience says to people, to that kid who's hungry right now, who didn't have dinner last night and maybe isn't getting breakfast or lunch because they're not in school right now, to tell them, I get it, I understand, I was there, and you can make it. You can make it. And there are folks here in Washington, D.C. who are your public servants who are going to make sure that we don't let you fall through the cracks, because so many of those kids out there, whether they are on the violence-ravaged streets of our cities or whether they are hungry right now, sitting at home, scared, not knowing if they're going to get to go back to school. So many of these kids may be our next generation's leaders and brain surgeons and Nobel Prize laureates. We just have to make sure we nurture them.
Well, thank you for continuing to lead. I really am grateful for your leadership. And we want to pivot now to a quick question on video from Mike Washington. He is a member of the Everytown Veterans Advisory Council.
Senator, thank you for your service and sacrifice to our country. I'm a Seattle firefighter and a Marine Corps veteran who deployed to combat in the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa. In June 2008, my only son, Sergeant Michael T. Washington, was killed by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan. So I worry about my brothers and sisters overseas, but I also worry about them when they get home. My son's unit, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, has been particularly hard hit with suicides after their return from deployment. After my son's death, I contemplated ending my own life. I considered jumping from a bridge, but turned back at the last moment. I know that if I had easy access to a gun that day, I wouldn't be here. Guns are used in 7 out of 10 veteran suicides. What more can we do to fight veteran suicide in our country, especially given the prominent role that guns play?
Well, thank you so much for that really moving question and for sharing your personal family sacrifices with us. Our Gold Star families suffer incredible loss, and thank you for your own service. Hoorah, Marine. My daddy was a Marine as well. The scourge of veteran suicide has been something I've been working on from the minute I woke up at Walter Reed. And it's why I got into politics, was because I didn't think we were doing enough to serve our veterans. There's so much we need to do, and it's such a complicated issue. It's an issue of mental health, of hidden wounds, and we need to make sure that there are no wrong doors, so that wherever a veteran turns for help, wherever he or she is, that she gets the help that we need. So often early on, a veteran was told, well, you got to be clean and sober before you can enter the mental health counseling, or before you can enter the VA's homelessness program, or before you can enter the jobs program, or before you can actually get help. Well, many of them are not sober because they're self-medicating because they went undiagnosed in the first place. We also have to look at making sure that our servicemen and women come home to jobs and continued supports for many, many years to come, and that we screen them for the hidden wounds of war and we take away the stigma of those wounds. So many of your son's buddies probably had traumatic brain injuries and didn't know that they had traumatic brain injuries. If you were in any type of an explosive event, you probably ended up with a mild traumatic brain injuries. That we know more about that now when it comes to talk about high school players, where they have mild concussions and over time those build up into debilitating conditions. Well, that happens as well. When I was at Walter Reed and when I was first at VA, both VA and Walter Reed were trying to recruit more pediatric brain surgeons. Why was the Army and the Department of Veterans Affairs trying to recruit more pediatric brain surgeons? Is it because they started treating children? No, it's because they had always been treating children's brains, because you see so many of our troops are under the age of 24. The 18 to 24-year-old cohort are the ones really on the front lines. They're the privates and the guys driving the convoys and the infantrymen out front. Those brains are not actually adult brains until you're 25 years old. So we're actually needing specialists in pediatric brains in order to take care of the brains of our combat veterans. So the issues just go on and on and on. The key thing is that we as a nation must fund the care for our veterans. We must fund long-term follow-up of our veterans and our men and women who are still in uniform. And we have to make sure that there's no wrong door, wherever they present themselves, they should be able to get help. And then we should also have, as part of our gun legislation, a real way to certify and check and do the background checks to make sure that someone who truly has a mental health issue cannot get their hands on a weapon, on a firearm, until that mental health issue is under control.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mike, for your service and for your sacrifice. Senator, I'd like to pivot to 2020. Just last week, the NRA endorsed Donald Trump. Together, they've spread fear and stoked divisions to keep gun stores open during the COVID-19 pandemic. They've also used racism and xenophobia to further their guns everywhere agenda. What do you think Vice President Biden should be saying about these issues leading up to Election Day?
Well, I think we need to call out the NRA for what they're doing. And by the way, the NRA today is really a tool of gun manufacturers. My father was a life member of the NRA back in the 60s and 70s when they were a true marksmanship organization and not controlled completely by the gun industry, who fund very conservative politicians who then keep the money flowing into their campaign accounts by passing legislation that the NRA wants them to pass. And so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are so scared of the NRA, not because the NRA is an organization that represents outdoorsmen and marksmen, because it's not that anymore. The NRA is an organization that represents the interests of gun manufacturers who want to sell more guns, who want to sell more equipment for guns to make money literally on the heads of our children who are dying in mass shootings and on the tragedy of our communities. And so Joe Biden just has to call out the NRA for what it is. And we have to make sure that we make very sensible issues the keystone of our discussions on gun control legislation. 95% of Americans support universal background checks. Americans support ending straw purchasing. Americans support making sure that we don't allow, combat-style weapons on the streets of our cities. Those are all things that outdoorsmen and gun, and marksmen support. Nobody, no marksman, no outdoorsman needs a 100-round drum like happened in Dayton, Ohio, that shooter used. If you're using a 100-round drum to go hunt deer, you are a really bad hunter and you don't belong out there. And if you're a marksman, like my dad was, and then like we had to do in the Army, part of the skill of being a good marksman is actually having the skill to change magazines quickly. So those things don't belong on the streets of our cities. And that's where I think we should focus the discussion. But call out President Trump for what he's doing. He's basically being a tool of the gun industry to sell more guns.
Thank you, Senator. Last question. So grateful for your time today. We're both moms. I think we both have an Abigail. Mine's almost 25. Yours is, I think, 5. And you can relate to our volunteers, many of whom are balancing homeschooling with volunteering and responsibilities at work. So I just want to know, how are you doing? And do you have a message for Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action volunteers who are continuing to fight tirelessly for gun safety and winning, even during a pandemic?
Well, to all the volunteers, I am so proud of you. And how the heck are you managing to find time to volunteer? Because I am struggling. I am homeschooling a kindergartner, and it's tears and fights and a lot of, I don't want to do it, let's not do this. And that's all just me. That's not even the 5-year-old. It's me every day going, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. This is awful. No, listen, I can fly a helicopter, but I'm not an educator. And oh my God, to all of the teachers out there, I admired you before. I lift you up on the highest pedestal now, because of the firsthand experience I'm getting trying to teach my daughter. I'm doing the best that I can. Apparently making her do push-ups as punishment, the way the Army punished me, is not the way to go with a 5-year-old. But that said, I'm just so amazed that all of your volunteers are finding time to volunteer in these really tough times, and we're all just barely hanging on. Many of us have lost jobs. Many of your volunteers have a family member who's probably lost a job, or probably worried about paying for their mortgage or their rent, or where their health insurance is going to come from, or whether their elderly parent is going to catch COVID. And then trying to decide whether or not to send your child back to school, and how are you going to work a job and homeschool. We're all hanging on by our fingernails, and for you to find time to volunteer is truly service. I serve my nation by picking up a rifle, but you're serving your nation by volunteering. And I'm just so proud of you for doing it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Senator Duckworth, for joining us today. We are so grateful for your voice in this fight and to have you in our corner.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to be here. Be well.
You too. Thank you to everyone who joined us today on Twitter and Facebook. Stay tuned for more. Follow @Everytown and @MomsDemand for more information on the next Demanding Women conversation. If you'd like to join us in this fight, get involved with Everytown, Moms Demand Action, and Students Demand Action by texting the word READY to 64433. Again, READY to 64433. As always, stay safe, and remember, nothing is more productive, persuasive, or powerful than demanding women.